Welcome to EKU Then and Now. I'm your host, Paul Blanchard, and I recently retired after a 35-year career as a faculty member and administrator at Eastern. This monthly series will focus on prominent EKU faculty, staff, and alumni who have had a meaningful involvement at Eastern during its history of more than 100 years. They will comment on what EKU has been like during its storied past, how it has changed, and what we might expect its future to hold. Our guest this month is Dr. Jane Rainey, a prominent member of the EKU political science faculty for more than 4 decades. She grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, did her undergraduate work at Goucher College in Baltimore, and earned her MA and PhD at Emory University in Atlanta. Her teaching fields include politics and religion in the United States and comparative politics. She is currently the director of the Cactus Project, one of EKU's QEP initiatives. QEP stands for Eastern's Quality Enhancement Program, and Cactus stands for Citizens Assembly for Critical Thinking About the United States, both of which represent important aspects of EKU now. And Jane, thank you for being here. You and I were at Eastern for a long time together. You came a little bit before I did. Tell us a little bit why you came to EKU in the 1960s to be on the faculty.
Well, they offered me a job, obviously, but actually I was just fresh out of graduate school. I hadn't written my dissertation yet. Back in those days, it was very easy to get hired without PhD in hand because so many universities like Eastern were expanding and trying to hire people. And I had used up my 3 years of my fellowship and needed a job, and Eastern, three things really made Eastern attractive to me. Number one, they were offering me a job in exactly what I wanted to teach, which back at that time was politics of the Soviet Union and world communism, which was really my specialty. Secondly, I was actually going on a trip to the Soviet Union and hoped to have a job before that. So I'd come back to a job, and Eastern offered me a job. The timing was just right. And then thirdly, I was very impressed when I came here and looked around. They had 2 things here that I really liked. First of all, at that time, we had 4 years of Russian language instruction, and I thought, goodness, a place that offers Russian must be a really classy place. And then secondly, in my other life, when I'm not teaching political science, I am an organist, and the chair of the department then made sure that I went over to Brock Auditorium at the time that a student was practicing the organ. I don't know if he set this up or it just happened, but he said, we have this wonderful pipe organ here. So I said, great. So that's what brought me to Eastern.
Well, it's interesting. You and I have a lot of memories that we share about writing dissertations and all of those kinds of things. But for me, you've underscored some of the really unique things about Eastern. Why would a school like Eastern Kentucky, almost recently a state college, have 4 years of Russian? Why would they have a beautiful pipe organ? Those kinds of things. And one of the people behind that was Bob Martin, who hired you. President Bob Martin was here from about 1960 to 1976. Obviously a very formidable and memorable person. Tell us a little bit about your recollections of Dr. Martin in those days.
Now, I have to say I was one of the few people at that time who was actually hired without meeting him. Today, we don't take all of our job candidates all the way to the president's office, but back then, you could not get hired without the approval of President Martin. However, when I came here, he was actually on a trip, an educator's trip to Yugoslavia. So I did not meet him at that time. I did have several other meetings with him.
What are some other memories of Dr. Martin?
Well, goodness, there were, as I said, I had just a few face-to-face meetings with him. Most of the time, he didn't pay much attention to me because I was simply a lowly faculty member. I did have, woman. I'm sorry?
And a woman as well.
That's true. There were not many women on the faculty at that time outside of English and nursing. But I did have, I think, at least 2 face-to-face encounters with him. Once was when we were trying to save a colleague whose contract was being pulled for some reason, and we all trooped over there, and we had to have an interview with Dr. Martin. And the first thing he would ask when you went in was, well, have you finished your dissertation yet? And I, of course, had to say no. And he said, well, why not? And so I explained to him that I had to change topics in midstream because my first topic wasn't working. And then I said the really right thing. I said, you know, my second topic, I'm really moving along on that because it has to do with the woman who was an educator in the Soviet Union. And I said, the Eastern Library has a lot of really good books on education. And so I'm able to use the library right here and do a lot of my work. And he liked that. And so he actually told someone later that I made a better impression on him than any of the other political science people. So some of my other encounters, I guess maybe that was my only face-to-face, but a couple of times I wrote letters to the editor of the Progress, and he was not happy with those. One was about women's hours in the dorms, the residence hall, and they used to lock women up at 10 o'clock. And I wrote a letter saying that there could be some very good reasons why women might want to stay out after 10 o'clock. Maybe they wanted to go to a concert or do something intellectual in Lexington.
Library, maybe.
Yeah, go to the library, right, if it was open that late. But it just so happened that he had written a letter to the editor defending this decision, and his letter was published before mine was. Of course, I didn't know that this was going to happen, and so my letter, the timing was not really good. Yeah. And he called the chair of the department. My name at the time was Jane Gerganis. He called the chair of the department and said, if that Gerganis woman would stop writing these letters to the editor, she might get her dissertation finished.
But he still remembered about your dissertation. That's interesting.
Oh yeah, he still had that. Well, I mean, that was the thing with everybody, though. If you got out of line, the dissertation was always a threat. The other similar incident, I guess, was when I wrote a letter about graduation, and graduation has gotten just totally out of hand, as you probably remember. In fact, there was at least one occasion when my niece served as a cribbage board while you and Bob Klein played cribbage during this very lengthy graduation, when they called out everybody's name as they walked across the stage, and the faculty was sort of hidden up in the bleachers. And so I wrote a letter saying, because it had just it turned into a circus with people yelling and cheering and leaving and so forth. I wrote a letter about that, and so he got up at a dinner after that and sort of referred to my letter and said, I will not preside over the disintegration of graduation, or something like that.
Well, but then we did take steps to shorten graduation.
After he left.
Yeah. But then now we're back again where all the names are being read, but we're having two graduations in its place, I guess.
Actually 3 at the moment. There's talk of dropping the summer one, but we have December, I think, and May. And
well, who were some of the other people in the 1970s that you remember as memorable, especially in political science and arts and sciences?
Well, I'd have to say something about Dean Ogden, Frederick Ogden, who was actually the founding father of the what is now called the Department of Government, but was political science department then. And he was already dean by the time I came, but a very his wife was English, and I think a lot of that rubbed off on him. He was a very sort of prim and proper, and just had this sort of intellectual air about him, which was sort of nice. And so I guess I have one little funny story about him. When I first came here, I was walking around the campus one day and ran into him and the associate dean, Glenn Carey, who was associate dean at the time. And Dean Carey said, "Hi, Janie." And I don't know where he got that from, but Dean Ogden looks at him and he said, "Janie?" And I said, "Well, yeah, a few people called me that, but it's not really what I go by." And he said, "If anyone ever calls me Freddie, I would be absolutely livid." And I don't think anybody ever did.